Al Pacino went from being a movie legend to being broke all at once after his trusted money guy committed a huge swindle and stole $50 million. In order to support his 29-year-old girlfriend who was seeing other men, he now pays $400,000 a year for landscaping on vacant homes at the age of 84. And playing roles that are degrading in order to live. Doctors battled to revive the Godfather star, who even passed out for a few minutes during COVID. This is a startling account of a Hollywood legend's decline. In East Harlem, New York City, on April 25, 1940, Alfredo James Pacino was born. Rose and Salvatore Pacino, his parents, were both Sicilian. While the family of his mother was from Corleone, his father had migrated from San Fratello, Sicily. Later, in The Godfather, that name would become well known. Pacino, meanwhile, saw it as just a part of his heritage. His parents divorced at the age of 2. Pacino and his mother had to relocate to the South Bronx after his father left to work as a salesman in California. Life was difficult. They were transferred to her parents' house by his mother, where Kate and James Girardi, his grandparents, reared him. The strong woman who kept the family together, his grandma, was in command. In the Bronx, one had to deal with hardships on a daily basis. When money was short, Pacino stole food, skipped school, and got into fights. Movies eventually became his escape, although initially he wanted to play baseball. His mother frequently took him to the theater. And by the time he was a teenager, acting was his only career goal. He never excelled in school. Although he went to Herman Ritter Junior High and then the High School of Performing Arts, he thought that academics were more of a hindrance than a means of advancement. The only subject he made it through was English. At 17, he left school. His mother was heartbroken. She wished for a stable career for him, one that would provide him with security. Their disagreements intensified when he refused. He eventually moved out and had to fend for himself. Those were some of the most difficult years of his life. He took on any tasks he could find: mail clerk, janitor, busboy, and messenger. He occasionally slept on the couches of friends or the streets because he had nowhere else to go. Additionally, he joined the wrong crowd. He began drinking and smoking at the age of 9. He was a marijuana user by the age of 13. His closest pals all became addicted to drugs, and 3 of them passed away from heroin consumption. Pacino saw the consequences of losing concentration. He was resolved not to have the same fate. He tried to get into the actor's studio but was turned down several times. He met Charlie Laughton at HB Studio after deciding to keep trying. His mentor, Laughton, taught him the art of method acting, a way of life that demanded intense emotional investment. Pacino put all of his energy into his trade, training day and night. However, financial issues persisted. On several evenings, he used the stage as his bed while he practiced in theaters. After that, disaster struck in 1962. His mother was just 43 when she overdosed and died. Additionally, his grandfather died less than a year after. The losses were heartbreaking. Pacino battled to remain afloat after having a depressive episode. Even though he was homeless at times and frequently had to borrow money to buy food, he persisted in pursuing his passion. He eventually got admitted into the actor's studio at the age of 23. He received instruction from one of the greatest acting instructors in history, Lee Strasberg. He learned from Strasberg to trust himself and to put his whole heart into every performance. Pacino had established himself. Success, however, was still a long way off. His fortunes turned in 1968. Critics and filmmakers took notice of him after he was cast in the off-Broadway play Indian Wants the Bronx. He won an Obie Award for the performance, which also opened doors that had previously seemed unattainable. Finally, after years of battling, he was receiving attention. In retrospect, Pacino reportedly remarked, "I knew I was this vagrant kid. All I needed to do, though, was be there when the time arrived." He had come to this point because of every adversity, rejection, and night on the streets. In 1969, Al Pacino played a minor but significant part in Me, Natalie, which marked the beginning of his Hollywood career. In the Fred co-directed movie, Patty Duke played a young lady attempting to make her way in Greenwich Village. Despite making a fleeting appearance, Pacino made his official cinematic debut. Living in Greenwich Village and studying under Charlie Laughton at the Herbert Berghof Studio, he was still a little-known actor at the time. He had won a Tony Award for Does the Tiger Wear a Necktie earlier that year, and theater was his true passion. He shown his intense dedication to performing in that play, but Hollywood was a different realm. "I wasn't a big hit, Natalie. However, the US and Canadian box office receipts brought in $1.9 million. More significantly, Pacino experienced his first time in front of a film camera. Despite being a tiny step, it was significant. He was cast in his first major part in The Panic in Needle Park 2 years later, in 1971. This was an even greater obstacle. Jerry Schatzberg was the film's director, and it was a grim and uncompromising look of heroin addiction in New York City. Alongside his girlfriend Helen, Kitty Wynn, Pacino portrayed Bobby, a small-time hustler whose life goes awry. Joan Didion and John Gregory Dunn wrote the script, which was based on a James Mills novel. Nothing about it was sugar-coated. It presented the brutally honest truths of drug addiction. Pacino gave Bobby a raw energy that made him both likable and extremely disturbed. His portrayal of addiction was hailed by critics as one of the most realistic ever to appear on television. The movie became a cult classic despite not being a monetary success. Although Pacino's performance was the most memorable, Kitty Wynn took home the Cannes Best Actress award. It attracted the notice of Francis Ford Coppola, a filmmaker who would forever alter his life. The Godfather was still in the casting stages. 1971, a well-known actor was what Paramount was looking for in Michael Corleone. They gave Robert Redford and Jack Nicholson some thought, but Coppola recognized something in Pacino that no one else did. Pacino was too small and not well-known enough, according to the studio, which pushed for James Caan. Coppola was not going to compromise. Michael's development from a reluctant outsider to a merciless mafia boss, he felt, required Pacino's quiet fury. Pacino nearly didn't get the part. During the first week of production, executives were not enthused. They felt that he was overly passive in his performance. Coppola struggled to hold on to him. Michael then murders McCluskey and Sollozzo in the restaurant assassination scenario. That was the pivotal moment. Everything shifted in that instant due to Pacino's controlled performance. Coppola's vision was finally realized by the studio. The Godfather was an immediate hit when it debuted on March 15, 1972. On a $6 million budget, it generated nearly $250 million globally. Pacino gave a memorable performance. He, James Caan, and Robert Duvall were all nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. The nomination alone demonstrated that he was more than just a stage performer, even though he didn't win. A Hollywood star, he was. He made a comeback in 1974 for The Godfather Part 2. Michael Corleone's current ascent to power and the early years of his father Vito Corleone's life, portrayed by Robert De Niro, were the two stories this time around. Michael had changed from being an outsider. He was now the family's leader. It was evident from Pacino's performance how power had changed him. He was more aloof, more vicious, and more solitary. It was hailed as one of the best acting performances ever by critics. Among the 6 Academy Awards the movie took home was Best Picture. Pacino lost to Art Carney, who was nominated for Best Actor. He nevertheless proved that his brilliance was acknowledged globally by winning the BAFTA for Best Actor. Pacino starred in Sidney Lumet's 1973 picture Serpico in addition to the 2 Godfather movies. It was based on the real-life tale of Frank Serpico, an NYPD officer who revealed corruption in the department. The part gave Pacino the chance to showcase a new aspect of his acting. His role was neither that of a criminal or a mobster. He portrayed a man who was up against an unjust system. He gave a dynamic performance. Because he had fully committed to the job, the frustration and rage he displayed on screen felt genuine. He was nominated for Best Actor at the Oscars again. Then, in 1975, Sidney Lumet released another movie, Dog Day Afternoon. Pacino portrayed Sonny Wartzik this time, a desperate man who robs a bank to finance his partner's gender-identifying surgery. The narrative was based on actual occurrences, and Pacino embodied the part with passion and feeling. When he walked outside the bank and began yelling, "Attica," at the police, a reference to the 1971 Attica prison riots, it became one of the most well-known scenes in the movie. The entire scene was improvised. Pacino received another Oscar nomination as a result of the film's continued critical and financial success. Hollywood's biggest star in the early 1970s was Al Pacino. His roles in Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, and The Godfather established him as one of the most renowned actors in the business. However, by the late 1970s, things began to go wrong. Bobby Deerfield was his first significant misstep in 1977. It was a romantic drama that Sidney Pollack directed to show off Pacino's other side. It became one of his worst failures instead. Viewers thought it was slow and uninteresting. Even at screenings, some people jeered. Critics were equally scathing. Given that home video wasn't even invented yet, one review criticized it, saying, "Drek, that should have gone straight to video." In 1980, his difficulties with cruising persisted. William Friedkin directed the movie, which followed an undercover detective as he searched New York's underground homosexual leather subculture for a serial killer. It was met with widespread criticism from the beginning. A lot of the conversation had to be re-recorded because of the protests by activists who blew air horns, ruined shots with mirrors, and made so much noise during production. The debate only got worse when the film came out. Many believed it to be exploitative. The story's unresolved ending left viewers feeling let down. Critics brushed it off as unclear and unfocused. Pacino later acknowledged that he regretted making the movie and declined to promote it in his 2024 memoir, Sonny Boy. He produced one of the greatest comebacks in movie history in 1983, but his career was in peril. Scarface was violent, exaggerated, and uncharacteristic of his previous actions. Tony Montana's involvement carried a great deal of risk. Originally slated to direct, Sidney Lumet was dropped due to creative disagreements. Oliver Stone struggled with cocaine addiction while writing the screenplay, which heightened the unadulterated intensity of the movie. Critics weren't impressed when it was first released. It was viewed by many as excessively violent. However, the audience's reaction was different. People were able to relate to Tony Montana's ascent and decline. On a budget of $25 million, the movie earned $66 million worldwide. It eventually turned into a cultural phenomenon. The phrase "say hello to my little friend" gained notoriety. Hip-hop musicians welcomed the movie, and its impact extended well beyond Hollywood. Pacino had once again demonstrated his superiority. Another catastrophe struck just when it appeared that his career was back on track. A historical epic about the American Revolution was Revolution in 1985. It barely made $358,000, $574, yet it cost $28 million to make. It was vilified by critics. It was common to make fun of Pacino's accent. Because of how badly the movie was received, he left Hollywood for 4 years. In 1989, he returned with Sea of Love, a strong smash that served as a reminder of his abilities to the public. But he didn't make a real comeback until 1992. Martin Brest as the director of Scent of a Woman changed everything. Frank Slade, a blind and resentful former Army officer, develops a bond with a teenage pupil in the novel. The position was complicated. Slade was erratic, furious, and endearing in his own unique manner. A stunning courtroom address that left listeners in a state of shock was the culmination of the performance. Pacino has previously received 8 Oscar nominations without taking home the trophy. He eventually won the Best Actor Academy Award this time. The movie won several Golden Globes and generated $134.1 million worldwide on a $31 million budget. He became one of the world's most renowned actors after decades of success. Notwithstanding his notoriety, he was on the verge of financial ruin that would cost him all. He spent millions on items he never used, lost $50 million in a Ponzi scam, and had to take on responsibilities he never would have thought of in his 70s in order to survive. Pacino trusted a man with his riches, and that man betrayed him the worst. Kenneth Starr was a financial counselor who worked with some of Hollywood's greatest personalities. Pacino thought his fortune was well taken care of. He fully entrusted Starr with his money. In fact, he let him sign checks for him. Starr maintained a false sense of security for years. He was actually operating a Ponzi scheme, moving assets between accounts and taking advantage of celebrity funds for personal gain. Pacino's money was gone by 2010, when the truth was released. Starr was found guilty in the same year. Pacino's wealth did not return even after he was given a 7.5-year prison sentence. After realizing what had transpired, the actor wrote about it. He had $50 million one day. The following day, he had nothing. The Ponzi scam wasn't the only thing that drained his fortune. Even his millions were insufficient to cover Pacino's squandering. The landscaping on a property he didn't even dwell in cost him $400,000 annually. Today, when adjusted for inflation, that would be around $900,000. In addition, he learned that he only owned 2 cars, but he was paying for 16. He was using 23 cell phones. He was clueless as to how these charges continued to accumulate. His funds had always been neglected. He let others handle the money and concentrated on acting. He believed his income was sufficient to pay for all of his expenses. Even his enormous salaries, $10 million per movie, were actually being eaten up by agency commissions, taxes, and legal bills. Furthermore, he rented rather than purchased real estate. He spent millions on lavish travels and lived in a variety of opulent residences. He spent millions on only one trip to Europe. In London, he booked a whole floor of the Dorchester Hotel and took visitors on a private Gulfstream plane. All appeared well until all of a sudden it wasn't. He had to take immediate action because his riches was gone. At that point, fans witnessed him in a capacity that astounded them. In 2011, he starred alongside Adam Sandler in the comedy Jack and Jill. Despite earning $149 million globally, the movie was a commercial success, but critics criticized it harshly. It has a 3% Rotten Tomatoes rating. Pacino won 2 Razzie Awards for Worst Screen Couple and Worst Supporting Actor for his outrageous portrayal of himself. Why he accepted the part was a mystery to fans. It was an easy answer. He was impoverished. He had to have money. And it was easy to obtain with Jack and Jill. According to reports, the movie paid him $5 million. It provided a lifeline. His riches was not restored, but it kept him afloat. Notwithstanding the criticism, the movie opened up new doors. He was contacted by brands for ads. Studios gave him new parts. He began to gradually recover his finances. Although he acknowledged that Jack and Jill wasn't his proudest moment in retrospect, he had no regrets. Even Adam Sandler was a pleasure to work with, he remarked. Al Pacino has 4 children from 3 separate relationships, yet he has never been married. Julie Marie, his eldest, was born on October 16, 1989. Pacino and her mother, acting coach Jan Tarrant, briefly dated before splitting up. With the birth of his twins, Anton James and Olivia Rose, in 2001, more than 10 years later, Pacino became a father once more. Actress Beverly D'Angelo, their mother, spent 6 years with Pacino between 1997 and 2003. Then, something unexpected occurred in 2023. Pacino had his 4th child when he was 83. On June 15, 2023, Roman, his son, was born to his girlfriend, film producer Noor Alfallah. Compared to Pacino, Alfallah is 54 years younger. When their romance started in April 2022, it soon gained attention. Diane Keaton, his co-star in Godfather, was one of the many well-known ladies Pacino had been connected to over the years. After The Godfather Part 3, they broke up after years of intermittent dating. After spending 10 years with Argentine actress Lucila Pollak, Keaton once declared her love for Pacino and referred to him as the most amusing man. He had previously dated Marta Keller and Tuesday Weld, among others. Despite these love affairs, Pacino never thought marriage was a good fit for him. He previously remarked, "It just didn't feel right for me." Fatherhood, however, was not the same. Even though juggling his job and fatherhood wasn't always easy, he always took satisfaction in it. He acknowledged in his biography, Sonny Boy, that he had not always given his twins the consideration they merited as they grew up. Moments that resemble sequences from one of Al Pacino's films have happened to him. Some made him forever different, and some were horrifying. They all reveal a part of his life that most people are unaware of. Something happened that would have had a totally different outcome back in the 1970s, when The Godfather had made him a household name. Pacino was too inebriated to drive home alone one evening after spending hours drinking with Gene Hackman's brother, Richard Hackman. A female admirer volunteered to give him a lift. He didn't think twice in his state. He climbed in. Initially, nothing seemed odd. Then he saw that they were going in the wrong direction. "Where are they going?" he questioned. He felt cold as she answered. "I'm abducting you." Despite his intoxicated state, instinct took control. Even after he told her he was getting out, she continued to drive. There was nothing to do but jump. He was all set. Perhaps she could see the fear in his gaze. Perhaps she knew he would not be readily charmed. For whatever reason, she abruptly gave up. She turned around and drove him home rather than taking him somewhere stranger. Pacino later claimed that his upbringing in the South Bronx had equipped him for such circumstances in his memoir, Sonny Boy. He had mastered survival early on. He was saved that night by his instincts. He had to deal with something far more perilous in 2020, about 50 years later. Pacino was struck hard by the COVID-19 virus as it swept the globe, and he became one of the numerous people who fell ill. Dehydration, fever, and nothing else. He was unconscious. He lost his pulse. For several dreadful minutes, he was gone. Paramedics in full protective gear showed up. Together with 2 physicians, 6 of them tried to bring him back. Upon awakening, he found himself encircled by individuals dressed in full medical uniforms. They appeared to have walked out of a science fiction film, he later remarked, but nothing felt more bizarre than what he had just gone through. Many who survive such near misses describe feeling a presence or witnessing a bright light. Pacino didn't sense that. It was, he said, a void. Here you are. You aren't. Not even your memories remain. You have nothing. He was altered by the event. It caused him to reconsider everything, including death, life, and the hereafter. He committed to improving his self-care and spending more time with his son, Roman, after he recovered. However, he is certain that moment will remain with him forever, regardless of the passage of time. Pacino has been fighting an unforgiving force long before either of these near-death encounters. For much of his life, he had been plagued by chronic sleeplessness. He had sleep problems for decades. He couldn't slow his thoughts. On many evenings, he remained up for hours, engrossed in thoughts that would not go away. On other nights, tiredness prevailed. However, sleep was never easy for him, no matter how exhausted he was. His everyday life was being negatively impacted by his lack of sleep by the time he rose to fame. He frequently remained up until dawn, which left him exhausted during the day. The impacts mounted over time. Mood fluctuations. Slips in memory, times when fatigue obscured the truth. He even said that during his darkest moments, he had hallucinations. He starred in Christopher Nolan's psychological thriller Insomnia, 2002, as a detective who was severely sleep-deprived. The part wasn't just acting for him. He had experienced what it was like to lie awake for hours on end, letting his thoughts wander. Problems with money simply made matters worse. A dishonest accountant once lost him millions. His restless evenings were made worse by the financial strain. The fight never truly ceased, even after he managed to cope. Although he had learned to cope with insomnia, it was still one of the most difficult challenges he had ever faced, an invisible battle that no one could see. Al Pacino has been regarded as one of Hollywood's most esteemed actors for many years. But stardom also brings scrutiny. Additionally, a few of his professional decisions and interpersonal connections have generated criticism. He acted in the thriller Cruising in 1980, which swiftly became a lightning rod for protests, and it became one of the most talked about moments of his career. The picture, which was directed by William Friedkin, had the potential to be an engrossing criminal drama. It featured Pacino as an undercover cop who infiltrated the homosexual club scene in New York City in order to apprehend a serial killer. In fact, it sparked a blaze. Not waiting for its publication, LGBTQ+ campaigners made their concerns heard because they were afraid film would propagate negative stereotypes. Demonstrators appeared at filming locations nearly every day as protests broke out during production. They made loud sounds, waved signs, and chanted, interrupting takes, to express their determination to prevent this film from portraying their community in a bad way. The reaction was equally strong when Cruise came to theaters. It was criticized for being exploitative. Divergent audiences felt that it sensationalized rather than represented the LGBTQ+ community. Pacino later acknowledged that he was sorry he had made the movie. He disclosed in his memoir, Sonny Boy, that he anonymously gave away his whole movie payment to a charity. He had hoped to test his acting abilities after seeing how it worked out, but instead he was embroiled in a scandal that never really went away. Years later, there was yet another contentious debate about Pacino's private life. There were questions raised right away about his relationship with Noor Alfallah, a lady who was 54 years younger than him. In June 2023, Roman Alfallah Pacino, their son, was born. However, their love affair ended in October 2024. She remained in his life despite this. In actuality, she and he stayed close, and not just because of their child. Alfallah had previously dated older, affluent men like Clint Eastwood and Mick Jagger, which caused people to wonder why she did it. Pacino's friends were concerned that she might be exploiting him for money. Not all of their worries were unwarranted. Pacino was ordered to pay $110,000 up front, as well as additional costs including $13,000 for a night nurse, and $30,000 a month in child support, according to court documents. Furthermore, he was required to make an annual contribution of $15,000 to their son's education fund. Alfallah maintained an extravagant lifestyle even after the split, which was ostensibly supported by Pacino. She was also seen dating other well-known men, such as comedian Bill Maher, in the interim. Pacino apparently felt deceived by this, but it didn't stop him from supporting her financially. His friends characterized him as utterly infatuated and conjectured that he might even be leaving her a large chunk of his wealth. This appeared to be an instance of love impairing judgment to some. Some perceived it as a warning about unequal power dynamics in partnerships. Whatever the reality, Pacino's love for Alfala kept the conversation going in spite of the cautions and conjecture. Regardless of whether he was being exploited or he was just choosing to help his child's mother, one thing was certain: Al Pacino was still in the news at this point in his life.